This is the Latin America Solutions video, part of the discussion for this part of the course. As we talked about in the last module, a section of this course is addressed to not only understanding global problems, but also thinking and talking a little bit about solutions to these problems as well. Pretty much all of the solutions that we are going to be looking at over and through this course will be focused on the issue of how does the world become a more developed place? In other words, how can we make the world healthier, better educated, and more affluent? In fact, that's how we define the term development in a social science context. In fact, there is something called the Human Development Index, which is a composite of how long people live in a particular country, what their education levels are, and what their income levels are. And these are all standardized across the world, so we can determine if a country is very highly developed, like the United States, or a country has a lower level of development, as many, for example, sub-Saharan African countries do. Of course, there are all sorts of different types of solutions to the issue of development, and we're going to talk about a number of them. In this particular module, we're going to focus a little bit on non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, as I will refer to them. NGOs are generally nonprofit organizations that have no official link to a government body whatsoever. And usually in an international context, they work somehow to improve global conditions. Oftentimes those are directly related to development and social issues and economic issues, but sometimes they're focused on things like environmental problems as well. And I've posted down below here logos from some of the very best known non-governmental organizations in the world, things that you've probably heard of before. Many of these organizations use what I call a project-based solution to problems using whatever particular types of expertise that they have. These project-based solutions are often run around communities and particular parts of a country, or maybe a whole country, and usually have some sort of special focus based on whatever that particular NGO tends to focus on. Most of the NGOs that we just talked about in the previous page use some sort of project-based solution like this. Later in the course, we'll talk about some other types of solutions that NGOs work, including single solutions and some interesting economic solutions as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about one particular NGO, which is going to serve sort of as a case study for us, and you're going to have the opportunity to explore that organization a little bit, and then in the discussion board post about it and what you learned about it and what you think it does well or doesn't do well. And that's an organization called Heifer International, which many people know because at holiday season they offer an alternative gift catalog, and you can buy or really sponsor Heifer International at the level of an animal, or bees, or goats, or cows, or something like that. So they're often pretty well known because of that. This NGO focuses on international development, and they in fact do use animals and training around animals, as well as a bunch of other things that are involved in their projects to try to improve living conditions in one particular part of the world or another. They also try to focus on repairing damaged environments, especially environments that have been damaged because of agricultural overexploitation, which is, of course, something that we are talking about in this particular module. Many of these projects also focus on various types of social justice. Heifer International uses a number of different types of methods in their work. You'll be exploring these methods and their tools when you take a look at their website a bit, but almost all of them involve some form of animal husbandry and the idea of passing on the gift, which means that if a family has been given an animal as part of a project, they're expected to pass on the offspring of that animal. There's also a lot of education involved in Heifer International projects, a lot of work in the communities to try to help those communities do their best to solve their own problems, which is often referred to in Heifer work as a value-driven model of community engagement. They're very local. They're run by people in country, even though Heifer International is based in the United States. The people who work in each of the countries that they work in comes from that country and has expertise in that country. The impacts that Heifer seeks are to increase people's food security. Again, something we're talking about in this particular module. How much money they make, ensuring that there is equitable gender in a society, that women have the same opportunities to advance that men do in a society where culturally appropriate, and that everyone gets to benefit from projects, not just people who are well positioned. So there's social justice involved in these projects. They also have a lot of environmental aspects to the projects, and Heifer often refers to their work as agro for agriculture, ecological projects. Agroecology is the desire to use agriculture to help to improve the environment when it can often do damage to it, and to overall build very strong communities. And as an example, let's talk a little bit about how some of this agroecology is applied in Honduras, where projects have historically been developed with animals like cows and chickens and bees, but also involve different types of agricultural products, including different types of plants, including things like pineapples, coffee beans, cool tropical crops that you might not have heard of before. Many of the projects in Honduras are focused in dealing with the problems of deforestation and slash and burn or swidden agriculture, which again is talked about in the story map. And as a result of this, the projects are focused on trying to prevent erosion and to make sure that nutrients that are produced in agriculture get recycled and that steep slopes are repaired even when there's been damage done to them by slash and burn agriculture. These projects also involve a lot of community capacity building, getting teams of community members to work together to solve their own problems, not only nutritional issues, but also health campaigns, often focusing on women's health. There's a lot of gender equity meetings and plannings in these particular projects too that you can explore a little bit as you look into the Heifer International projects, not only in Honduras, but in other parts of Latin America and other parts of the world. Here are a couple pictures that show one of these projects in Honduras. And I will tell you, I had the opportunity to visit this particular project. A number of years ago, I worked with Heifer International on a higher education project. And so I got to see projects that they were working on in Honduras, in the West African country of Senegal, and also in China as well. So these are pictures that show typical slash and burn agriculture on a steep slope, and the damage it does often to grow cash crops like bananas, which are very hard on the soil and on erosion. The Heifer projects were trying to repair the problems of slash and burn agriculture by encouraging what's called intercropping, and also terracing in many of the agricultural areas. New crops were introduced, including this particular nitrogen-fixing plant, which I think might have been called a pigeon plant or a pigeon bean plant, that was used to feed cows that were involved in the project as well. Here's another example of terracing of land and the use of what are called living fences to reduce erosion. So there are all sorts of different types of ways that these projects unfold, and I'd like you to explore them a bit more. There are lots of other NGOs out there that engage in project-based community development, and I've listed a couple here that I just happen to know a little bit more about through my own research and teaching over the years. And I'd love for you to explore some of these organizations as well as Heifer International as you explore this whole concept, and feel free to post about these things in the discussion board. And if some interesting questions come up, or people have some questions that they have about Heifer or the types of work that it does, I'm happy to weigh in. You might send me an email to make sure I can see a particular post about that. So enjoy the discussion, and I hope you get a lot of good reflection on this idea of project-based NGO work.